I think this is a very powerful potential strategy for you because it's going to help you make sure you have multiple calls to action when you're a guest. You have one call to action for the listeners and you have one call to action for the host. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode. It was episode number 44. Should you have a co-host? Again, after doing over 1,300 episodes with a co-host, I understand at a fairly deep level what that takes and what goes into that. So make sure you listen to that episode if you are ever contemplating going into this with a business partner or a co-host. Today, for episode number 45, how to get on other shows and what to do after. So first thing I'm going to tell you, getting on other shows either matters way less than you think, way more than you think, or both. Now, why do I mean that? Okay, or what do I mean when I say that? When I first started podcasting, I remember thinking to myself, wow, if I start getting on other podcasts, everything is going to blow up. One of the first podcasts I ever went on was a gentleman named Sam Bakhtiar. He's actually since passed away. We interviewed him on our podcast, and I ended up getting interviewed on his podcast. I think it was called I don't remember. Maybe the 1% Life podcast. I don't remember what it was. But I remember logging on, and he did this podcast from his garage with one of his Ferraris in the background. And I was like, oh my goodness, we are going to blow up after this episode drops. Nothing really happened. All right. One of our other first interviews I did as a guest was with Anthony Trucks. Anthony Trucks has spoken on stage in front of thousands of people, former NFL player, American Ninja Warrior, great dude. He's a friend of ours and a really good human being, but he has a large audience, and I expected, well, that's going to help us blow up too. No, not really. You got to understand at the end of the day, it's going to do a lot of things, but it's most likely not going to create overnight success for you. Maybe you already know that. I wish I knew that in the beginning. Clearly I didn't. So when I say it's either going to do way more than you think, way less than you think, or I guess it could do what you think is going to happen. When I say it's going to do way more than you think, there's way more opportunities than just getting listeners. When I say it's going to do way less than you think, you're probably not going to blow up overnight, like I said, but it will do what you expect if you have the right expectations. Okay. So in this episode, that's what I want to jam on. And I know that's a little bit confusing. For some reason, I'm all hyped up today. I don't know why. Okay. How to get on other shows. Let's start there. So the platforms that we have had the most luck with there's 3 of them. Really, I would say one big one kind of good, and one was eh. All right, number 1, Podmatch. Podmatch is a service. Again, I'm not sponsored. I'm not getting any money to say any of this. I believe it's either $29 a month or $39 a month. And Podmatch sets you up where you get matched with podcasters. And what you do is you fill out, okay, I am in self-improvement, or I am in sports, I'm in business, I'm in whatever it is, and I want to be on shows that talk about that. And every single day you'll get, I think you get 3 matches a day or 5 matches a day or something like that. Just think of it as a dating website for podcasters. Pretty good shows, very good hosts. There's a lot of them. If you go and send a couple messages a day, you'll be able to do that for a long, long, long time. I mean, you could probably send, I don't know, 2 messages a day to a potential host for a year. There's a lot of people on there. I think it's like $29 a month. Now, the next one's Matchmaker. It's called matchmaker.fm. Matchmaker is very similar to Podmatch, except you kind of search for shows in an industry. So maybe for me, I'd search self-improvement, and then you can send people messages instead of them matching with you and then you kind of having a relationship through that. Again, I think it's either $29 a month or $39 a month. And then the last one's podcastguests.com. Podcastguests.com is different. You sign up to an email list kind of thing. Every single week, I think, it sends you 10 shows that are looking for guests and 10 people who are looking to be guests on shows. So some of them might be, I won't say big people, but they're people who have paid to be featured. So some of these people have books coming out. Some of these people have done pretty big shows. So you might be able to get somebody that would be a good fit for your show. But there's also 10 shows that are looking for potential guests like you, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. It's not necessarily catered to self-improvement or business or sports. It's kind of just, there's 10 shows here that want to have somebody on. Maybe it'll fit for you. Maybe it won't. But you can just click on the email and you can send that person a message. Podcastguest.com, it's not as organized as Podmatch or Matchmaker. Probably not worth it. But here's the thing. I'm pretty sure you can sign up for free. So it might be a good place to start. So those are the three. Podmatch for us has brought more success than anything else. The wonderful Laura on our team, I think she's currently sending 5 messages a day. So we're sending 35 messages per week to get on other shows. Podmatch is the best, matchmaker.fm second place, podcastguests.com third. So this is my question to people when they come to me and say, hey, how do I get on other shows? What is your perceived area of expertise? Now, all I mean by that is this. Yes, you might have a podcast about self-improvement, or you might have a podcast about sports, or whatever it is, but is that actually your perceived area of expertise? So just as an example, we have a client who is a coach. She's a business coach. She's a prosperity coach. She's a mindset coach. She's a peak performance coach. But she also has one of the top orthodontics practices in the United States. Her perceived area of expertise is in dentistry, orthodontics, and business there, in leadership. So she can use that to get onto platforms that she normally wouldn't have the opportunity to, because her perceived area of expertise is greater there. So if you think about it this way, yes, I have 1,300 and whatever, 30 episodes of holistic self-improvement, and that's great. But a lot of people, when I go on their podcast, they want to talk about podcasting, and they don't even know about this show. So in a way, my perceived area of expertise is podcasting as much as it is anything else. So that does allow me to get on shows that I might not be able to get on otherwise. But that's my question for you. What is your perceived area of expertise? If, say you're a single mom with 5 children, you might be able to go on a parenting podcast long before a podcast about what you talk about, unless what you talk about is parenting. So I just like to throw that out there because I think a lot of people, maybe they didn't start their own podcast from a place of their area of expertise. Maybe they're not trying to get on other podcasts from their area of expertise. But in the beginning, I would do fitness shows. I would do that type of thing too, because I was into fitness. I was a personal trainer and all that stuff. So that was my perceived area of expertise. So on Podmatch, it's easy, right? All you have to do is write, and I'm happy to, if anybody wants to reach out, I am happy to send you exactly what my profile looks like. Or if you're on Podmatch, just look me up, Kevin Palmieri. All you want to do is you want to build credibility. You want to tell a little bit about your story, and you want to give the host an idea of what is the value you can add. On Podmatch, there's a bunch of places for you to put, these are the topics I talk about, these are the questions I like to get asked, this is kind of my bio, this is kind of my claim to fame. So it makes it really, really easy. But think of it this way. As a podcast host, what are you looking for in a guest? Are you looking for somebody who has a really impactful story? Okay, a lot of times I go on shows because I have a quote-unquote impactful story. Awesome. Other times I get brought onto a show because we have so many podcast episodes. Awesome. Other times it's because we've been able to monetize the podcast. Awesome. So depending on your profile, that's really going to determine the level of success you have when it comes to getting on these other shows. The name of the game, honestly, is just consistency. Can you send 2 messages a day? If you can send 14 messages a week, that's going to be 56 messages a month. Even if you get a 10% conversion rate and you get on 6 shows a month, cool. That's a great place to start. 6 shows a month is better than none. And that's, for many people, that might be a realistic run rate where you can actually show up and do those. So make your profile as nice as you can. Talk about your accomplishments, talk about your story, talk about what unique perspective you can bring to the audience, and make sure people understand what your perceived area of expertise is. Hammer off messages consistently, 1 a day, 2 a day, 3 a day, whatever it is for you. And then the key is wait. In the beginning, it took a while before people would get back to us. And now I think our conversion rate's like, I don't know, it's either 50 or 60%. So if we send 100 messages, I'll end up going on 50 or 60 of those podcasts. And that's a very, very good conversion rate. So if you can get that number, you'll be crushing it. So that is what I would aspire to. Just track the shows. So this, I guess this is another good segue here. Create a spreadsheet where it says, the business podcast, message sent, whatever date, message or like response received, yes or no, show booked, when, boom. And then when it's done, you can check it off. Done. So you'll have a running tally of all the shows you've been on, and you're going to want that for the rest of what we're going to talk about today. So that's what I suggest to do to get on shows. It's really easy now compared to where it used to be because there's a lot of platforms that are created for this. Again, Podmatch is the best one I've seen. I think it's $29 or $39 a month. But if you have a way to make money by going on other shows, that will pay for itself, hopefully in the first month. Okay. So when you go on a show, there's a lot of different thoughts around this, but when you go on a show, obviously the main goal is for you to add as much value as possible. Okay. Go on the show and crush it. Do what you do, add value, give good quotes, give a good story, give great lessons, give value, just try to blow the host away. That's the job, right? You want to crush it. But when you get to the end, you're usually going to have an opportunity to give some sort of call to action. Now, here's where a lot of people have different opinions. Some people will say, for my free course, go to my website, blah, 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 blah. For coaching with me, email me. This is my email. This is how much coaching is with me, whatever. Go to my website, whatever. Other people will say to join my mailing list or get a free ebook, click the link in the show notes that I provided for the host. Awesome, awesome, awesome. My frame is always get people to listen to Next Level University because as we've spoke about many times, as we've spoken about, whatever the proper terminology is, as we have talked about many times on this show, if the business is set up correctly, you want people to come into the top of your business model. I don't want somebody to jump into the mailing list. They don't know who we are. It's not going to be as valuable. I want them to listen to the podcast because that's where we're going to add the most value and then earn your trust to move you to the next level of the business. So when I ask people, what is your call to action when you go on other podcasts, it's usually all over the place. I always suggest your call to action is to listen to your show because that is where people are going to get to know the most about you. So that's just my frame.
I just wanted to take a quick second and give a shout out and a huge thank you to Next Level Podcasting Solutions, Kevin and his team. They have been incredible to work with, very flexible, on the spot with any questions that I have or any concerns that I have. When I first started out my podcast, I was doing everything on my own. I have no editing background. I have no podcasting background. I knew nothing about it. And so I was bootstrapping all of this myself while I was still trying to take on my role as a full-time mom. And once I met up with Kevin and we had these discussions and I got on board with adding an editing team, oh my goodness, it just lifted this weight off of me. It lifted my time that I was spending doing my editing. And in the beginning, full transparency, when I was editing just my individual recordings, it was a little more manageable, not super manageable. And then when I started doing my interviews for the podcast, it was hours upon hours of me doing the editing that didn't include any of the promotional material that I am now getting from Kevin and his team. It wouldn't have been sustainable. I would not have been able to keep up with that. So I recommend Kevin and his team. They have done wonderful work in helping me grow my podcast. I have really enjoyed working with the editing team, and it definitely feels like more of a team environment versus me hiring them to do a specific job. I mean, we all work collaboratively on the projects that I have. And I have these crazy ideas sometimes, and they come up with a solution to fit my needs. I can't recommend them enough. I really enjoyed working with them. Kevin and the Next Level Podcasting Solutions, thank you so much for the work that you have done in the past and are continuing to do for me. I'm growing this community and growing this platform with a beautiful team that is working for me and with me to see my vision and help that come to life. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate you guys.
Now, I kind of teased this a little bit earlier. One thing that I have noticed for myself and most of my clients, definitely myself, is the majority of the money you make by going on other podcasts is not going to be by the listeners of that podcast. It's probably going to be from the host. Now, what do I mean by that? I go on a podcast, and if it is an aligned show with a host that I like, a host that I want to help grow, a host whose mission I believe in, I will offer them a free call. If you're listening to the show, maybe I have done a free call with you. On this free call, my goal is to add as much value as humanly possible. I don't talk about money. I don't talk about prices, packages, nothing. I say, based on where you are and where you want to go, what do you believe is the best use of our time today? And I also have a Calendly sheet to fill out where it has some questions about what's your biggest struggle, why'd you start your show, all that stuff. So on this call, I will try to help this person solve as many of their problems as possible, give them a roadmap to success, raise their awareness, show them the possibilities that they could have, just raise their awareness, add value. Sometimes we get to the end of the call and somebody will say, hey, just wondering how much does it cost to work with you? And I'll say, well, what you're looking for is blah, 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 blah. Cool. I'll send you an email. No worries. Sometimes that turns right into a client. Other times I will send a Zoom whiteboard. So I take a lot of notes in Zoom on the whiteboard. I send them over via email, and I'll attach our packages and say, if this is ever aligned or if this is something you'd find value in, just let me know. I'd love to chat. For a lot of people, we forget. See, this is the interesting thing. We forget that a lot of shows are only getting 20 to 50 listeners per episode. So think of it this way. There might only be 25 people who hear your episode, but there is one host who you just had a half hour or an hour conversation with. Now, this is why it's so important to ask yourself, what is your perceived area of expertise? Because, for example, I have a client who is a web developer. When he goes onto a podcast, they might not be talking about web development. But if he says at the end, hey, I appreciate that your time today. I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me on. As a token of my appreciation, I'd love to offer you a website breakthrough session where I go through your website and I try to help you figure out, are you accomplishing the goals with your website that you want? The next logical step from that, if you add value and they need your help, is for them to work with you. It's different. It's not like you're trying to sell something. You're just adding aligned value to somebody you already added aligned value to, just in a different way. So I think a lot of us believe, well, maybe somebody will listen. Somebody who listened will reach out. Sure, they probably will. But you also don't know who those people are unless they reach out. You always know who the host is. Now, again, I understand my circumstances are different because I'm a podcast coach going on podcasts. So it's definitely easier for me in terms of asking somebody if they would like to do a free call. Definitely, right? I have that unique opportunity just based on the fact that I coach podcasters. But I've seen this work with business coaches. I've seen this work with fitness coaches and nutrition coaches. I've seen this work with web developers. I've seen this work with stay-at-home moms who do coaching for productivity. I've seen this work for people in all sorts of industries, leadership coaching. So here's the thing, and this is a very hard thing to explain. When you are a guest on somebody's show, there's an energetic positioning that happens. So imagine if I had a guest on. I am going to do everything I can to make that guest look good. Today we're having on blank blank. This person is a top 100 podcaster. They've been in the industry for 10 years. They know so much. I've been consuming their content for years. I read their book. I listened to their show. They've coached me. I am going to have to raise that person above me energetically. Now, here's the interesting thing. If I didn't know that person and I hadn't worked with them and we got to the end of the call and I had held them above me during the interview, if they asked me if I wanted to do a free call, I'd probably say yes, because if I think somebody is ahead of me, I want help in what they're ahead in. That's why this perceived area of expertise is so important. It's not going to be podcasting for you. So it doesn't matter if you only have 25 episodes, but what if you've grown $1 million business? Okay, you can do a free business call. That type of thing. Maybe you don't have 1 million podcast downloads, but maybe you have 7 years of being a fitness and nutrition coach. Cool, you can do free calls based on that. That's the interesting thing is, it's almost like the interview and what you offer after don't even have to be aligned as long as one of them is your area of expertise. So when I say how to get on other shows and what to do after, I think what you should do after is try to add more value to the podcast host. Obviously, you're adding value on the microphone to the audience, but once that's done, you don't know who's listening to that show. And here's the other thing. You have no idea when that episode's coming out. I've had episodes drop literally the same day. I've also had episodes drop 6 months later. It's very hard to keep track of that, right? And then how do I know who came from what show unless they tell me? So my goal in this episode is to help you reframe the expectations around what happens when you go on other shows. When you go on other shows, yes, you can expect a bump in listenership. Probably not as large as you think, based on the fact that some of these shows probably only have 20 to 50 listens per episode. Nothing wrong with that. But if 10% of those people come listen to you, that's only 2 to 5 people, right? Does that add up? Absolutely. But is that going to blow up overnight? No. But you do have the opportunity to talk to somebody directly, add value to them, and then try to add more value to their problems behind the scenes. And it has worked really well for us. Now, again, I just want to make this clear, and then we'll hop off because this is a little bit of a longer episode. I just want to make this clear. My goal on these podcast breakthrough sessions is not to sell. My goal when I go on another podcast is not to do so well that they want to do a podcast breakthrough session. I only do these calls with shows that I believe in. Trust me, there's many where I'm like, you couldn't pay me to help you. I'm just not interested. It's just not aligned for me. I think that comes through as authentic. And if you're the type of person who wants to pour into other people, this is the other thing. Most people aren't expecting a lot from a free call. Really. I mean, there's always that moment when I log on with somebody where I can tell they're waiting for me to sell them on something. And I say, based on where you are and where you want to go, what do you believe is the most valuable use of our time today? And then boom, I bring up the whiteboard and we're off to the races. So I think this is a very powerful potential strategy for you because it's going to help you make sure you have multiple calls to action when you're a guest. You have one call to action for the listeners and you have one call to action for the host. And you'll be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of hosts who are trying to grow not just their podcast, but they're trying to grow their lives. They're trying to grow their business. They're trying to become more capable. They're trying to learn, whatever it is. So your unique area, your perceived area of expertise is probably valuable to someone in a different way than you being on a podcast. So that is my goal, to bring awareness to that in this episode. Now, I know that can be a little bit challenging. I know it's harder to get on shows sometimes, depending on how many episodes you have and what you've done in the world, but don't ever be afraid to start very, very, very small, and don't be entitled when it comes to going on shows. There's a lot of people who want to say, oh, I'm not going to go on the show because they're not big enough. They only have 15 episodes. Trust me, when you have this understanding that it's not just about the size of the audience, it's about the host too, it's going to be worth your time. And it's a lesson anyway. You get to practice your craft and you get to be better at being a podcast guest and telling your stories and see what lands and see what doesn't. honestly, doing an episode like this is hard because I'm just talking to the camera and I have no idea how you're resonating with this. I have some idea, but I can't see it. I can't really practice my stories and get a reaction. So being on other shows is such a beneficial thing for all of us as podcasters because it helps us master the craft. If you have any questions on anything I said, I know I hammered in this episode, I'm very much in flow. Please reach out. I'm happy to answer them. As always, if you are interested in doing a free call, again, I talk about it in every episode when we're talking about the strategy, but you have a good idea of what a free call with me would look like. I just want to add value. Promise I'm not going to sell you anything. Link will be in the show notes. Next week for episode number, what time we got? Episode number 46. I'm going to talk about the difference between marketing and sales. So a lot of people start podcasts and they say, it's free marketing. But I don't know why nobody's coming out of the woodwork to sign up for this, to sign up for that, whatever it may be. And a lot of people don't understand that there's a lot of sales that goes into podcasting and growing a podcast. So we will talk about that next week. Again, if you have any questions on what I talked about today, please do not hesitate to reach out. Everything you need to know will be in the show notes. I know I hammered on this. The too long didn't listen version. There's Podmatch, matchmaker.fm, podcastguest.com. Make a really good profile based on your story, your perceived area of expertise, and what value you can add. Go on the show, crush it. Make sure you have good audio, good video. You're on time. You know the audience. Add as much value as you can. When it gets to the end of the interview, your call to action with the listeners should usually be, come listen to my podcast. If you enjoyed what we talked about today, then after you get off the air, you can always say to the host, hey, as a token of my appreciation, I'd love to offer you a website breakthrough session, a nutrition breakthrough session, whatever it is. Or you can always send them a follow-up email later with your link to a free call, whatever it may be, Calendly. There's a bunch of different calendars out there. And then from there, add as much value as humanly possible, and you'll be surprised. Some people will literally say, how much does it cost to work with you? Other people you can always send your packages to later. That's the too long didn't listen version. As always, I appreciate you all very much. We are almost a year into this Bad Larry, and it is going so incredibly fast. So I appreciate you all. I'm very grateful for you all. This is all a dream come true for me to be able to do this as much as I do. And I'm just grateful. So all the love, keep on podcasting, keep on crushing it, and make sure you join us next week for episode number 46.